Today we're going to talk about some pretty in-depth topics. So I have a PowerPoint that we couldn't get to function correctly, but I'm going to still use it because I got to weave a lot of really deep topics together so that it all makes sense. I promise at the end it's going to make perfect sense. And that's why I have this beautiful drawing right here that you guys are going to get to see at the end, because I decided last night I needed to make a flow chart so everybody could understand. But we're going to talk about stress. We're going to talk about anxiety, depression, and addictions, where they come from and how they function in the body, and what we can do to combat those, okay? There's some pretty advanced technology out there now that we're not just beholden to the regular standard practice of care for that. So, all right, what we're going to start with is the brain and spinal cord. It is the most important part of our body. If the brain and spinal cord do not function correctly, nothing else is going to function correctly, and that's where the source of the addiction can come from, okay? So our body has three ways that it can handle stress, in essence, three pathways. It uses the brain and spine, it uses the chemical reactions, and then it uses the emotional system to handle the stress. Right now, we're going to talk about the brain and spine and its ability to handle stress, and I'm going to make it nice and simple for us. Oh, Taj left. Taj, can you get me a paper towel? We have our brain and we have our spinal cord. All right? How our brain and spinal cord function is when we deal with stress, the spinal cord actually stretches itself. Okay, so it pulls. It's normal. It's exactly what's supposed to happen. When the stressor goes away, that's supposed to relax itself. Okay, and the body's not supposed to have that tension pattern. We have a membrane that surrounds the brain and spinal cord called the dura. It's very, very important. If we are in a stress response, the spine stretches, the dura starts to get friction with that spinal cord, and it creates dural adhesions. These little calcifications, we'll call them, all on the spine. We know these can form by the age of 4 years old in the body. What this means is if we're at our set point right here and we leave our stress point and we go into a stressor, how we can come back are these pathways, right? How we can get back to our center. When we start to have these dural tension patterns happen, the body can't come fully back into rest and digest and peace and ease, and it starts to stay in a stress response for a prolonged period of time. Does that make sense? All right, that's the brain and spine locking in. At the same time, what's happening is we have the HPA axis. Don't worry about the name. This gets activated. This is our chemical stress response, okay? So H talks to P, and it comes down, out the nerves, does its thing, and hits the adrenal gland, okay? The adrenal glands are then going to start to release cortisol. How familiar are we with cortisol? Stress hormone. Public enemy number one, according to Psychology Today. Okay? This is, and when I say public enemy number one, when it's out of control, you need it to wake up in the morning. We want these things to happen. We want our adrenal glands to do what they're supposed to do. We want the cortisol to do what it's supposed to do. It's when it runs unchecked that all this starts to happen. Okay? When cortisol starts to run rampant in the body, it can actually, well, it does a whole bunch of things. It can increase heart rate, increase blood pressure, decrease sex hormones. It'll decrease your immune system, increase inflammation will skyrocket in the body. But one of the key things that gets overlooked is it actually decreases dopamine. And dopamine is our pleasure molecule. It makes us feel happy. Okay? So it's going to decrease dopamine. This is going to be very important for later and how this all links together. Okay? So, are we good with this before we get into the really fun stuff? Yeah? You got your picture? All right, cool. All right, so now we got cortisol running rampant in the body. And we have a nervous system that's locked into stress, fight, or flight response. Now we're going to take a break from that and pause for just 1 second, and we're going to talk about a system in the brain that is called the brain reward cascade system. This is basically your feel-good chain of reactions that happen in the body. So you have this. You have your brain reward cascade. I'm going to make it super simple at like a 30,000 foot view. You have a receptor site, and then that receptor site will have other things that happen. And then you have dopamine. So if you have dopamine floating around and it hits the receptor site, it goes, oh, this feels amazing. And then we feel really good. Okay? This then motivates us to seek behaviors that gave us this reaction, right? You do really good at school or something and you get a good grade and that's something you value and you get a dopamine hit. All of these things happen and this is how the body is supposed to respond. Now, back up just a little bit. When we get those tension patterns on the brain and spinal cord that put the system into a stress response and that HPA axis gets activated, we decrease dopamine. Okay, so we decrease the amount of dopamine in the body. While that's happening, the tension patterns on the spine are going to start to create what is called a reward deficiency syndrome. What reward deficiency syndrome means is you have the same receptor site and something is hijacked here at the receptor site. Okay, so usually there's something wrong with the receptor site when the dopamine's not docking. So if I have this unit of dopamine and it can't seem to find its way into the receptor site, how could I stand a better chance of getting dopamine to dock? I could do something that stimulates dopamine. Does that make sense? So if I do something that floods my body with dopamine and I have more units of dopamine flooding around in here, and one of those docks, and then I feel good, I associate this event with this, with feeling good. Well, what makes us feel good when we have a depleted system is addictions and compulsive disorders, often at the same time. Addictions can be something as simple as having reoccurring fights with your spouse. That can be an addiction. Scrolling TikTok, an addiction, right? Food, sex, drugs, gambling, all of these things are addictions that we have so that we can do this, so that we can do this. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions before I move on from that? No? All right. You want to get a picture? So what happens is when this receptor site also isn't, when the receptor site's not doing the right thing or dopamine is now decreased in the body, right, because cortisol's high, so then we decrease the dopamine. You decrease the dopamine and the receptor site gets hijacked. The body then sends a signal all the way back up to that HPA axis that says stress, stress, stress. So they're both happening at the same time, which I'm going to depict here in a second. So this is the wonderful flow that I came up with last night when I was like, nobody's going to understand this if I just talk about it. So I got to make it make sense. So here we go. We're going to start with dural tension in the spine. Okay? The body's lost its ability to adapt because the body has subluxation and tension patterns in the spinal cord itself. Okay? So we have decreased adaptability. This makes us susceptible to all kinds of things. Diseases, addictions, everything. When you lose the ability to adapt. All right, now one of two things is going to happen at this, well, two things are going to happen at the same time. This is going to start to hijack and create reward deficiency syndrome where you have that site that needs more dopamine to dock. Okay? It's also going to create HPA axis dysfunction. HPA axis dysfunction is what medicine calls when the HPA axis is not functioning correctly. The National Institute of Health did a study, top 100 most common diseases in the world come back to HPA axis dysfunction, which actually comes back to tension in the nervous system, the spine's inability to adapt to said stressor. Okay? When this happens, I want to make sure I get all the stuff put on here. This is fight or flight. Okay? And now, this, when it goes into dysfunction, it means we're in chronic stress. All right. Chronic stress then is going to go to the next level, and we are going to deplete dopamine. All right. The depletion of dopamine is going to increase stress response. And it's also going to create difficulty regulating cortisol. So now cortisol is going to run rampant. What this does is, boom, reinforces this and comes back, hits here, and reinforces more tension on the spine. The body starts to lock down even more. Not just the spine, but the brain starts to lock down even more. All right, now we have a reward deficiency syndrome that's happening. The body's inability to dock dopamine and inability to produce dopamine. When that happens, you're going to get your addiction and your compulsive disorders. For a short term, this actually decreases stress. We've all had that beer and felt real good, right? But then a day or two later, or days on end, we don't feel so good. So this is where long term it gets bad. This actually, when you do this, it reinforces neurological patterns in the brain and creates more dural tension patterns in the spine, and this is the vicious cycle we get caught up in. We go round and around and around. Question?
Yeah. Now, is this going to go into like how this links into a lot of the chronic diseases and things that eventually come from this that we all try to treat with medication, but that's really not what's going on?
I can totally go that direction. Tomorrow's talk's going to be a little more that direction. I wanted to keep this one more. I could do this talk, and this talk could be 4 or 5 hours long. Yeah, like we could really go deep with it, because that's, I think, we can't segment health anymore. It just can't happen. So if we go all the way back to the beginning of this talk, when I drew the brain and spine, that talks to 100 trillion cells. So while all this is happening in the brain, you also have 100 trillion cells in a stress response saying no thank you to everything and starting to freak out. This is where it stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks, and why actually finding the source is the move to make as opposed to popping the next pill. You know, my favorite thing is like, you know, do we have more faith in the man-made pill or the power that made the body? You know, you just got to get the power that made the body balanced and doing what it's supposed to do, and it's going to do its thing. So I'm happy to go there with you, but nah. So I want to keep it all in the realm of like those addictions and the compulsive disorders, because that I think now, again, stress, depression, anxiety, addictions, I think that's what's plaguing our society more than anything. And if we can get that right in the brain, you can actually decrease histamine responses and all these other things when you get the brain doing what it's supposed to do. That's a good question. So this is a lot of information in the shortest way that we can do this. So do we feel good about this and what's happening at the same time? All right, cool. I'm going to erase it after you take that picture. Good? All right, so now let's just follow up on everything real quick. We have, let's call it spinal cord tension. We have HPA axis dysfunction, which is your stress response. Well, they all are, but you have reward deficiency syndrome, which is going to start to give you more of the addiction and compulsive disorders, right? So we're following all these things. Now, we have a wave in your brain called the P300 wave. It has been called your state of optimal human performance, the P300 wave. The P300 wave is pretty awesome because it reflects quick processing information, focus, mental clarity, all of the beautiful things that we want to be sharper and more on edge and be able to handle everything in life. That's what this does, okay? When we suffer from tension on the spine, increased amount of stress on our body, or some type of an addiction, this wave is massively hindered in its ability to do what it's supposed to do. So the body can't process information the way it's supposed to. It can't do the things it's supposed to do. So do you see all this layers, kind of like what you were talking about, like how this bleeds into everything? Now we have a massive array of like basically a bomb that's been dropped in the brain, and all of this is not functioning correctly. So when you get this right, it shows optimization of the nervous system. When you get optimization of the nervous system right, you see an increased response to a body's ability to handle stress. Okay? When you get that doing what it's supposed to do, you're going to increase attention, cognitive function, ability to focus, creativity, all of those things. This is why people come see me that are CEOs and COOs, because we make this go through the roof in its adaptability, right? And so the better it can adapt, the better you can function as a human. So you get this right, this right, this right, and this right. What happens with people with addictions? I'm going to tell you. It's pretty awesome. So we did a study with chiropractic care and patients that were in addiction treatment centers. So patients that were just normally through the addiction treatment center, that was at 74% success rate. And then the patients who added just chiropractic care, nothing else that I'm going to talk about today, had a 100% success rate in their addiction and treatment centers. They made it all the way through. It's like unheard of, right? Just by taking care of the tension in the spine, rewriting these brain systems, and allowing the body to do everything it's supposed to do. So some of the things that the adjustment is going to do, and I made sure to write them all down, is we're going to reduce that tension in the spine and get the body to literally go back to peace, back to ease, back to calm. Okay? We're going to rebalance the HPA axis. When you do this and you rebalance these things, you balance dopamine production and you return on the receptor sites. You get the body's ability to make neurotransmitters do exactly what it's supposed to do again, and the body starts to feel really, really good and calm. Okay? One of the best things that happens after the adjustment is everybody's like, why do I feel so calm? Why do I feel so at peace? Why do I feel so centered? Okay? Because we're rewriting all the neurotransmitters, we're rewriting the brain and its body's ability to balance. Basically turning that parasympathetic nervous system back on. All right. That's with the adjustment. Now let's talk the Theta Chamber, because that's why you guys are here, to want to hear about that too. So the Theta Chamber, and the inventor of the Theta Chamber states it blatantly. If the brain and spinal cord aren't doing what they're supposed to do, nothing's going to work correctly. Okay? So Theta Chamber decided to do their own research study with cocaine addiction. They took 116 cocaine addicted people and they put them through the Theta Chamber for 21 days straight. Then they followed them for an entire year. Only 4 people relapsed. You want to talk about some powerful stuff. You add an adjustment that rebalances all these things, a Theta Chamber that rebalances all of these things, and you add a treatment center, you're talking about world life-changing care for people.
Excuse me, the 100 people went through the Theta Chamber how many times?
21 times.
And the Theta Chamber is how long?
30 minutes per session. Yep. 21 times. Yep. And that only 4 relapsed. So that's extraordinary. They didn't have follow-ups after those 21s of the Theta Chamber. The brain started to change, which is exactly what we want to see. So the Theta Chamber is going to change the neural plasticity of the brain, and so is the adjustment. And that's exactly what we're looking for. So that basically tells us our brain's pliable. We can change it. We can change our pathways. We can change the way it functions. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So the Theta Chamber, one of its core things that it's trying to do is it's trying to stimulate the hypothalamus in the brain and create new neural pathways that are kind of void of the challenges. So if you have a neural pathway that tells you every time I get stressed, I got to have a glass of whiskey, that pattern, every time you do it, gets reinforced and reinforced and reinforced in the brain to give you said result. So you have to stimulate new pathways so that the old ones, just like a muscle, eventually die off and atrophy and you don't need them and they don't stay as strong. So what the hypothalamus is going to do, that part of the brain, is it's going to help stimulate serotonin and dopamine production. So if we take the adjustment and we clear the nervous system, we open the brain and spinal cord and we allow it to balance, and then we add the Theta Chamber that's going to stimulate the production and regulation of normal dopamine receptor sites and normal dopamine production, we've just got one win right there, along with creating more neural pathways. Okay, so it's just one of the things that the Theta Chamber does. The Theta Chamber does also something that's super awesome, is it spins. So the spin, we found that when you spin children with Down syndrome for 30 minutes, that they're going to have, I think it's a 28% increase in cognitive ability and like a 26% increase in like physical ability to perform just from spinning, not from doing anything else to the children that have Down syndrome. So when you add the spin component, and why that matters is the inner ear has these little hairs and does all these things. Why it's important to play. We start to lose the ability to adapt and to move and to have cognitive balance and all these things as we get older because we quit playing. That's why we used to spin around on the things as kids. It's why we used to hang from the monkey bars, because we're actually stimulating the inner ear, which is giving us all of that stuff. So as we lose that, the brain starts to atrophy, all these things start to happen, and the neurocognitive behaviors start to show up in ways we don't want them to. So when we spin you in the theta chamber, and you can't feel it, you only feel the first 2 spins. That's it. And I don't like to be spun around, so I promise you it's awesome. So you feel the first 2 and you don't. What's actually happening is we're getting the conscious thought to drop back. So we're getting basically all the shit thoughts in our brain to drop down and away, and it allows us to start to have more access to that subconscious brain that is actually creating all the things. So these things are stacked in a manner that is in a very scientific way to allow us to have access to the brain. So now we've created more dopamine response in the brain. We've got the conscious mind to drop out. So now what are we going to do? We're going to use binaural beats to get the brain into a theta brainwave state. So if anybody doesn't know what binaural beats are, if you listen to 100 hertz in the right ear and 108 hertz in the left ear of sound, your brain can only focus on one sound, and it goes to the sound of 8 because it's 100 and 108. It picks the sound right in between. Okay, so we know between 4 and 8 hertz, that is your theta brainwave. From the time you are born until you're 7, you're in a theta brainwave state. That is our receptive state. Before bed and when you wake up the first thing in the morning, you're in a theta brainwave state. That's why they tell you to say the positive affirmations, all of these things. This is how we talk to the unconscious mind. Most people feel that they're succumbed to wherever they're at by 7, because they tell you what, 98, 99% of your beliefs are hardwired into you by the time you're 7 from your parents. So you're basically screwed, and then we spend an entire lifetime trying to undo all the shit that our parents gave us, right? So this is a fast track way to get the body into a theta brainwave state, get the chemicals balanced, and I like, while I'm in there, to literally meditate on what I want because I know I'm in that receptive state. Like if someone could take me back to 1 to 7 and I could program myself, I'd be a fucking machine. Sorry, my bad. I get excited. I'd be a machine. I'm sorry. I just, programming children's minds that way, it's like one of my favorite things. I love talking about it on my It's Dad Time stuff. I do it with my daughter all the time. That's the most important thing you can give your children is positive beliefs that they're going to carry with them throughout their life. So when theta brainwave is it closely linked with enhanced creativity, memory processing, increased neuroplasticity, which is just what I talked about, because we build these pathways in our brain for all these crappy beliefs we have. So the neuroplasticity in our research with that is showing we can literally undo them. So instead of taking a very, 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 very long time, you can start to enhance that process with all of these things. And then it's going to facilitate flow state. Okay, so Theta Chamber is going to help you get into flow state. What does every athlete want to be in all the time? Flow state, flow state, flow state. So we're going to pause for 2 seconds. I know we're talking about addiction and compulsive disorders, but if you put all that aside and you're like, listen, I'm a CEO, I'm a high performer, which is basically the majority of my clientele, and you take somebody who doesn't really have a ton of those behaviors, I will argue with you that you do, because that's most likely how you got where you are, but that's a whole nother story. Or a professional athlete, and you put them in the theta chamber with the adjustments and you start to see it, the cognitive ability skyrockets. Because when we're not taking someone who's quote unquote sick and you're taking someone who's already an elite performer, it's extraordinary what starts to happen to the brain. That's the world I like to play in. I know this talks for the addiction, but they're not void of each other, right? Like you can easily go the other direction and increase human performance like crazy with this. I see it in myself and I see it in my clients all the time. So that's an important state to have. Now we're going to also add cranial frequencies. So the cranial frequency and the light is going to help stimulate areas of the brain that are going to help right the brain reward cascade system, which we talked about before, right? We're going to get us out of that state. What this also does when we're using cranial frequencies is going to help assist in thought patterns. It's going to help assist in everything we just talked about, opening that up, keeping us in that theta state, giving us new beliefs, giving us new vibrational frequencies of positivity and optimism and all those things. It also is going to help, again, reinforce dopamine, serotonin, and all the neurotransmitters that we need to help facilitate in the body. Does all that make sense? And then, just for the heck of it, they decided to add a PEMF mat inside the Theta Chamber, which we know is amazing to improve cell function. It's going to help reduce pain, and it's going to help boost blood flow and all the awesome things in our body that we know if we get all of that flowing in the right direction by itself is extraordinary. So you take all of these little pieces, and they're all little extraordinary things, but when you stack them together, you get something incredible. The PEMF is basically like giving your body a battery charger. It's awesome. I love it. So Dr. Jay Holder did some research, and I think it's valid to bring it up right now, to help assist when the brain reward cascade system goes into reward deficiency syndrome. There's 4 precursors to neurotransmitters that help balance that. They're amino acids that are very cheap. They're very easy to do. Don't take them without consulting your medical professional. But they're L-tyrosine, L-glutamine, D-L-phenylalanine, and L-tryptophan. His research showed 750 milligrams a day, 3 times a day, because they're the precursors to the neurotransmitters, helped rebalance those, and helped with the addiction and compulsive disorders. Sure. L-tyrosine. Do you want me to spell them?
That one I'm okay with.
Okay. L-glutamine.
That one you could, oh, glutamine I know.
Okay. DL-PHENYLALNINE. Phenylalanine. And then L-tryptophan. Just eat a bunch of turkey.
What was the doctor's name?
Dr. J. Holder.
And 750 milligrams of each, or is it
750 milligrams of each 3 times a day. Again, this is not my recommendations. This is just what the research said. Consult your medical professionals. Make sure. But it showed to help with the neurotransmitters they're the precursors to the neurotransmitters that stimulate mood and reduce addiction cravings. All right, so before we go any farther, are there any questions about anything we just talked about? Because it's a lot of information in a short amount of time.
What is HPA?
Oh my goodness, you're going to make me think. Hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal. Pituitary and adrenal. That's just a cascade of how it functions. Yeah. Okay, so I have a couple offers for you guys today. If you are ready to make change in your life and you're ready to enhance your cognitive ability and get over the things that have been bothering you for a while. So the first one we have is we'll offer you 21 Theta Chamber sessions, because that's where that research shows. 5 chiropractic adjustments that are going to rebalance that brain and spinal cord. 21 zippy sessions. And we'll talk about the zippies real quick. So it's a negative ion rain that comes down on you. And we want to do that because it pushes out all the positive junk, right? It helps get the EMF out of you. It helps balance you. It helps do all the things. Basically like living in nature, right? At a hyper speed. So that's why it's going to do that. That's going to also help balance that serotonin, because we know as soon as we're by running water, we start to stimulate serotonin in the body. And then offer the 360 assessment. So I don't know if you know about our 360 assessment, but our 360 assessment is extraordinary. So what we do is you come in and we do a complete comprehensive blood panel on you. We do a Geneva stool, 3-day stool sample, so that we can find out what's happening in your gut for over the course of 3 days and really understand the gut-brain connection and everything that's happening there. We're going to do a Cyrex and a Kennedy-Krieger test. So we're going to see how And then we're also going to see how your cell membranes are functioning. Our cell membranes are probably one of the most important parts of our body. If the cell membrane is not functioning correctly, we cannot let things in and take things out of the cell. Okay, so that's completely crucial to how the body's ability to process quite literally anything and everything we give it. Okay, we're also going to do a VO2 max. We're going to do a BioWell, which is going to give us the energetic field of the body. We're going to do an in-body, which is going to give us all of our body fat percentages. We're going to do a face scan so that we can see what's going on with the face and the pores and the skin and all of those things. And then we're going to do the Oligo scan, which is going to tell us heavy metals and toxicity of the body. Once we have all of that data, you're going to meet with our microimmunologist, Danielle. And so she's the only person in America certified to do microimmunology. So you will meet with her. You also get another visit with me with that 360 assessment. And then our team of doctors get together and we come up with, based off of your goals, your results, and everything, a protocol for you. So while you're starting the Theta Chamber, while you're starting the adjustments, while you're getting the brain to do everything it's supposed to, we're going to get all of this data on the back end to optimize your health the best way possible. So normally that would be about $15,000 for all that. If you do that today, we're doing it for $7,200. Okay? The other option we have is if you want to just dip your toe in and you want to see what it's like and make some change, we're going to do 5 Theta Chamber sessions, 5 Zippy sessions with that negative ion rain, and 1 chiropractic adjustment. Normally that's $2,300. We're going to do that for $999. Okay? That's going to get you started. It's going to get the brain to change. I'm an extremist. I want to go all the way. I know the research shows 21 Theta Chamber sessions is what gets us there. And that's what I choose because that's how I live. But I know people want to test it. And I promise you, you get an adjustment, you get in a Theta Chamber 5 days in a row, you're going to start to see how the body's functioning completely different than it was functioning before.
Could you repeat, so the second choice is 5 Theta Chambers, 1
One adjustment and one 5 Zippy, so the negative ion rains. And that's really meant to be done in a week or 2 max. You really want to condense that together because we want the change of the brain to happen. Does that make sense?
People feel in general,
Mhm.
because there's such a variety, from a certain amount of people, do they feel something? Do they respond to you and say, after 1 Theta Chamber, I feel something?
So when I see people,
Something?
when I see people that get the adjustment in the Theta Chamber in the same visit, yes, I get that result all the time. Some people, when they just do 1 Theta Chamber session, maybe they don't feel something. It really depends on where you're at neurologically and how much you have going on in your brain. We know through research that 1 session in the Theta Chamber will start to stimulate new neural pathways. So it's happening, whether you want it to or not. You know, like once you get in there, it's stimulating the new neural pathways. So yes, you do feel a change on 1, but like you really want to drive that change home. Does that make sense?
And people who choose to do the 21, do
Yeah.
they prefer that they do that in a very short period of
Yes.
time also?
Yes. The shorter period of time you're able to do that in my personal professional opinion, the better the results you're going to get. The faster the results you're going to get. You're still going to get change. It's still going to happen. But if you were able to do that within 6 weeks, you're going to feel extraordinary results as opposed to 6 months. Does that make sense? Yeah.
After my first Theta, I definitely started noticing like my mind was more sharp.
Yes.
And then after my second one, I was like, wow, I've tried tons of supplements. None of the supplements that were even like mushrooms, none of that really had an effect. But after like 1 Theta, I didn't even know everything that it was capable of. I just went in blindly, and I just started to notice like my dreams, started coming back. My mind was sharper. I was able to speak better. So I had damage from mold. I already started noticing a lot.
Yeah. And you take like damage from you did mold, all these other things, and then we can even dip our toe into basically that protocol I just gave you. You take someone with a concussion, gone.
Yeah, concussion.
I mean, we're gonna get the body balance, the brain balance, the spine balance. It's gonna do basically everything we need it and want it to do. So anybody that's out there, because I know people are listening, just to summarize what's happening here, you're suffering with any type of addiction. Again, Don't just think drugs or food or all these other things. Understand doom scrolling is an addiction. Understand work is an addiction. Understand fighting with your spouse every week is quite literally an addiction. If you want to break those cycles, we have a 100% success rate in treatment clinics when you add chiropractic. I'll explain that in 1 second. 100% success rate when you add chiropractic to a treatment center, and then you have, 112 out of 116 cocaine addicts did not relapse after the Theta Chamber. You stack these things, you're setting yourself up for success. Doom scrolling is on like people that are on social media and they just sit there and scroll new posts all day long for over and over and over again.
Oh, that's what they call it?
That's what they call it. Doom scrolling. Yeah. All right. Any questions before we wrap up?
I do.
Okay.
When you went through Zippy, could you repeat that again? Because you went.
Okay, I'm sorry. Sure. So we have it here. I don't know. You may have seen it. I can take you over and show you after this. But you sit in the chair, and it has a negative ion rain that comes down over you. So negative ions are basically what we get from nature, from grounding, from doing all of these things.
Similar to when you're in an electrical storm, right?
And what?
An electrical storm. Lightning.
Yeah, but this is more. I would say this is more like if you're sitting next to a river with your shoes off. You know, like you're on, your feet are on the ground, you're connecting with earth, which is all the negative ions, all the beautiful things. And when that happens, and the way this is designed, because it's a high amount in a short amount of time, it's able to literally like get the EMFs and get the cells functioning again. And the body can take that and then it gets rid of the positive ions that it doesn't need that represent all the crap. Does that make sense? It's a wonderful thing to sit under. I'm thinking about buying one for my couch because I'm just like, just want to sit under it all the time because we just don't get outside enough anymore. We just don't, you know? I mean, when you work all the time or you do, it's just, and when you live in the city, you're just not outside. I mean, I took my daughter home to Pennsylvania 3 weeks ago and we weren't inside at all. You know, all we were out, my 25 acres, you know, we're out there, we're on the four-wheeler, we're running around, we're making fires. Like you don't do that in Miami, you know? So to augment that, you have this beautiful machine that's going to reinforce everything we've did. Cool? All right, guys, if you have any questions, just pull me aside and we can chat, and I can show you the Zippy's machine too if you need me to. Awesome? Yeah, I'll show you, no problem. Cool?